Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the EasyPower Tuesday Refresher webinar series. My name is Jim Chastain. I'm an applications engineer here, and I extend a friendly elbow bump to everyone in attendance. The primary purpose of this series is to give focus to specific issues that either come up in questions to tech support or questions during the ArcFlash workshops that we do. And it gives us an opportunity to get into more detail on relatively focused features of the EasyPower applications. And so thus is the case for today. And we're primarily going to be looking at the guidelines, touching on the guidelines for ArcFlash labels, and then primarily spending time on the use of the tools, both in doing a standard label printout and then how to implement a customized version of the tool of the label that illustrates company policy, and then more customized labeling with something called a QR code. So again, welcome to all. And as we are in the habit of doing, we want to start with a couple poll questions, and I appreciate your feedback. There's no obligation at all, and it just helps us kind of focus the discussion. So the first question is, when you customize an ArcFlash label, which elements do you customize? Would appreciate some feedback on this. Again, it's not something that comes up in a day-to-day conversation, and frequently the questions that do come up are more of a technical nature, and so then how to implement or customize the display and how it's used in a day-to-day environment is what we're trying to impact or facilitate. So it looks like we'll leave this open for about another 10 seconds. Majority weighing in. All right, let's see how we show up on this. So here's how people weighed in on this particular topic, and that pretty much reflects some of the responses we get. And then the second question is, when you do print the labels out, who actually puts them on the equipment? Frequently, people will do a study, and once they leave the site, send the labels back to have the facility maintenance people do the affixing of the labels to the equipment. Just curious about how the audience deals with that particular task. Okay, looks like we have a plurality. Let's go ahead and display this. And it looks like it's pretty close. All right, so let's jump into the details of today's discussion. I mentioned we're going to touch briefly on the guidelines. There are several standards that get into the details of how the label should look, what the symbols should be, colors and the like. ANSI Z535 probably is the most recognized consensus standard that has sections on colors, signs, symbols, labels, barrier tape, and the like. It also describes the definition, if you will, or the application of the words danger, warning, and caution. And I put this under the category of consensus standards because there's not any place the requirement that we have to do things in a certain way. The advantage, obviously, if things are standardized, there's less training that's required, and people on contract that are familiar with the standards from another location would be able to move around in our system fairly easily. Other standards that talk about labeling are NFPA 70E, which describes which pieces of the equipment should be labeled and what information that label should contain. And as I mentioned, most of these are consensus standards, which means they're voluntary. Following the standard is a voluntary situation. The NEC, the National Electric Code, has some specific requirement for service entry labeling if it does not have a standard arc flash label already. And this falls into the category of mandatory in the case where you have to apply for building certification or building permit sign off. And so it's something that's actually in some places codified in the local regulations. Then in addition to this, there's some discussion afoot that one of the problems with the evolving knowledge base of arc flash is the problem that labels need to be changed every 5 years. And so there's some discussion about the possibility of having a generic label on the equipment, and then the operator or the technician go to some other source for specifics on both PPE and incident energy numbers. So that's an open discussion. I don't have an opinion on it one way or the other. Now, when it comes to EasyPower's capabilities of printing a label or developing a customized label, I'm going to talk about 3 different examples. The first is just using a basic template that's installed with the tools and making relatively modest additions and showing basically what the print options are. Then we're going to get into how to implement a company policy that's designating a site-specific PPE, and then more of a customized label showing the ability to do conditional displays of text, images, and this thing called the QR code. So in general, the steps to access the label printer are effective from the arc flash hazard spreadsheet. So here's a 1-line diagram that's completed. I've completed the short circuit study on it, calculated incident energy, and then either use F8 or this icon in the top center called Arrange for Arc Flash to display the arc flash hazard spreadsheet. Once I select that spreadsheet, the table gives me the label, access to the label icon. And the first thing that comes up is a print preview window that has several capabilities to utilize the installed templates. If we're starting off with a standard 4x6 multicolor, but we could have any one of 35 or 40 different standard outlines or templates that are included. This is usually displayed based upon the size of the label or whether or not we have the caution banner or the color banner at the top. Once I've selected the template that I want to use, I can then display it, modify how it's going to be displayed on the print layout. So right now we have a single 4x6 display, and if I wanted to, we could print this out to a PDF file, and each of my 9 buses would have a separate label image. If I wanted to print on my own printer and I wanted to set up with multiple rows and columns, I could do that as well. And we could set up, let's say, 2 columns and 3 rows. And if we show that particular layout, it could be a stock from, say, a commercial vendor like Avery, and our displays are shown in the window to the right. And we can modify the dimensions of the label and the placement of the label on the sheet. And that includes the images, the separation between them, and the margins involved. So this is pretty straightforward. It allows me to, built into the tool is a Windows driver. And so with a modicum of effort, you can interface the EasyPower tools with pretty much any Windows-driven printer. There are some on the website that we have tested and can attest to the fact that they're compatible with the software. I can also add comments as a standard addition to each of the label. And in this case, I might just put in label comments if I could spell. You get the idea. And as I do that, it shows up on each of the labels and it'll be included in the printout when we do the printer. Once I've done that, then I can select the devices that I want to print. If I want multiple labels per bus, I can make that addition or subtraction here. If I wanted to print on a page that already has some labels taken off of it, I can modify the first page of my printout thusly and save paper or printer stock that way. And then as I go to the completion of the printout, you can see that we'll have multiple pages because I have multiple images of some of the print, the labels. Okay, so that's available just from the standard template inventory, and these are always a good thing to be familiar with because they're also the place that we're going to start when we do our customization. So if I'm happy with this, I go ahead and print it and be on to the next task. All right, my next discussion will be the demonstration of a site-specific policy from a company that wants to define, rather than use a category level or the instant energy description on the one-line diagrams, we want our labels to display a site-specific designated category. So we're going to go to short circuit focus, follow all the buses, look at instant energy, arrange for arc flash, select the spreadsheet. Select our labels, and then we're going to stay with our standard 4x6. Okay, in this case, we want to, once we've selected the template, we're going to go into the label designer up here at the top, and it gives us a chance to, and the point here is these are standard templates. Once you make some changes to them, you want to save that image, that template. So let me go to my standard 4x6. All right, so I've picked up a standard multicolor 2018 version. I'm going to start the editor. That puts me into the label designer. That gives me the ability to look at the HTML code, which is part of the template, and then modify it in the box here. As I select each particular element, the tool shows me the ability to change that information, whether it's text or a enclosure. In this case, I've selected the external rectangle. You can see by the little pull tabs on the image, but also showing the dimensions and origin of this particular rectangle. So consequently, I can size as I do so, and it changes these images. Now we have this conditional, the color of this, and the fill color by default is orange. If the instant energy gets above 40 calories, the fill color goes to red. And so as we scroll through our buses, we can see that in fact the fill color does change, and in fact the text does change. If I select the text image, the text box, by default it shows warning by if it exceeds 40 calories instant energy, it will go to danger. If I want to modify this text, it's a matter of just putting that extra text in the image or in the preview box. And now every time it goes to danger, we'll see the new text. Now, in this particular case, if you notice, for the PPE level, we're showing a level C, which has been defined by the company as a site-specific category. And the way we set this up, if I go back to my device library, if I open, I guess I need to go back into my one-line diagram or EasyPower, whichever comes first. The device library has default settings for PPE. And if I go out and open the device library, you'll see that I have access to these categories and I can customize them on my own. So if we look at PPE levels, we've got PPE levels as defined by 70E, and then we got PPE levels that are 130.5, which are site specific. So we've defined level A, B, C, and extreme danger. And in this case, the text says refer to NFPA 70E 2015. I guess my preference would be refer to company policy where the definition of that category is. So I'm going to say refer to company policy. And then we're going to save that or close it. Now as we go back to our short circuit focus, fault the bus, arrange for arc flash, and then select the spreadsheet and open up the label printer. As we go back to our different buses, we can see that if we look at, I thought we had a 12 calorie, yeah. So it says refer to the company safety manual for a definition of level C. Now that's just me. The point is that you can customize it to anything that you need it to be or want it to be. And this is all done in the label editor by setting up the PPE. I've expanded the number of columns displayed down here in the spreadsheet. If we look at the report configuration, you can see there's some 3 dozen or so different columns. I've included PPE description and comments as part of my display, just so I know I can pick them up to use in my label. So in this case, level A is the variable PPE. If I wanted to put in other variables, I could do that here. And in this case, it's not conditional on anything. It's just part of the display. Okay, so that's site specific and some comments on how to implement it and what this means. The company training manual and the company's procedures should be complete enough such that there shouldn't be any confusion between any other training that technicians have had at other sites. Okay, so let's call that good. Now I'm ready to exit out of here. Now I'll do this on the next example. One of the things I want to emphasize is as you make a change to the template, make sure you save that with a new name, because it will overwrite the template and make it less versatile going forward if you can't go back to the original template. So again here, what we're going to look at is we fault the buses, arrange for arc flash, and go to the spreadsheet. Here I want to pick out my multicolor with with the device code. Oh, before I do that, I want to show you the device code. Let's talk about that. If I go back to the database edit and look at the main, I have in my database the ability to put in a bunch of other information that we don't normally dwell on. And so under location, description, we have the ability to do a device code. This is actually under specification. And very seldom do we talk about it, but in this case, I want it to be a unique connection to this particular bus. And so on a couple of the buses, I've put in designation that correlates to the bus number, which again is unique. And based upon that, we can use this as a conditional output or conditional function in our labeling. So we're going to go back to default the buses, arrange for arc flash, and go to the label editor. Now the template I started with was a standard 4x6 multiplier, but then as I started to create changes to it, I saved it as a DC standard 4x6 because it has some changes in it. So once I've selected the template, so this is the procedure I used. I selected a typical template, I start the editor, and then once I make any change at all, even if it's just doing a space in the text, which I might put right up here, as soon as I made that change, I want to save the template with a new name so it doesn't overwrite the old template. And that won't show up until, or that icon won't show up until I actually make the change. Now what I'm talking about is this QR code. And if we look at the conditions that we've added, it's there based upon the device code. In this case, if it exists, if it's not equal to blank. So as we scroll through our buses now, we can see we have in some cases the QR code and in some cases others. Now what does this do for me? If you were to scan this QR code right now, even on your screen, you would see a connection to a dummy web page we have behind our firewall that's correlated to that device code. And in this case, I think we have a 3-digit number entry system. The customer was asking for the ability to have his technicians scan the label and then enter the voltage and current that he's reading on the panel. In this particular case, I believe we put in the PPE description and the verbiage from table H3B of NFPA 70E. And then finally, in this one, we actually have a section of the one-line diagram linked to this website, this URL. So if someone were to come up and scan this, they could see the context of this particular bus in the one-line diagram. Now there's virtually no limit how often this can be updated. This is information that can be changed daily or even multiple times a day to make it fresh in terms of informing people changes in the safety status or hazards in the area. In addition, it can be used to, like I say, promulgate not only safety information, but other information like the user's manual for this particular piece of equipment or the restocking status or any type of connection I wanted to do. What we've done is relatively simple as far as set up a static website, but with a little bit of IT work, you could work out a system that approximates inventory tracking, asset tracking, and inventory status or preventive maintenance status. So there's a lot of versatility in this, and it's relatively easy to implement. So from an EasyPower point of view, this label is literally this information up here. And as I change this information, for instance, if I put in, let's say EasyPower 1, COM 1, you can see the image changes. So that's what's being added as far as the EasyPower capabilities. So you may want to talk to your IT department to see where this might fit in with your equipment tracking or safety planning. I think that kind of covers what I wanted to talk about. Let's see what else is on the agenda. I do recommend that you check out the website, easypower.com. We have regional training sessions for the first half of the year set up. We have online training as an alternative to regional training, basically the same information that can be accessed remotely. We have several other videos even on this topic and others on the website. And certainly if you have any specific questions or help implementing any of these schemes that we're talking about, you're welcome to contact tech support at easypower.com. And then finally, we have announced our Flash workshops. Thank you very much for attending today. Didn't really get into too much on questions. If any questions came in on the website data portal, we'll answer them via email. Thank you very much for attending and have a good day.